Welcome to this afternoon's presentation. Please give us about 1 minute for everyone to join and we'll get started. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for Breast Cancer Risk Factors, Reducing Exposure to Harmful Chemicals, featuring Pujeeta Chowdhary of Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. Before we get started, you know what I like to do. I like to learn where you all are Zooming or calling in from today, and that helps us know that you can hear me. If you want to type in the chat what city or state or country you're joining us from today, I'll be able to know that you can hear me. Thank you. London, Canada, New York, Chicago, Westminster, Colorado, San Francisco, Oklahoma. It's so wonderful to have you all from coast to coast, all over the world joining us for this very educational, important webinar. Before we get started, I would like to remind you to use the Q&A function that you can find in your Zoom to ask questions at any time. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll be taking pre-submitted questions and your live questions. So please use the Q&A function if you have a question during this presentation. You will receive an email with the webinar recording once we have completed, and our webinars are also archived under the events section of our website if you ever want to go look at the replay. And closed captioning is available in English. Welcome. We are the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program. If this is your first time joining us, I'm so happy to have you. We are proud to offer free, doctor-recommended, expert-led resources to help you reduce your risk of cancer, cancer recurrence, and chronic illness. If you haven't already, our website is anticancerlifestyle.org to explore all our resources. Most of them are free. We have resources amongst under all our themes: change, mindset, diet, fitness, environment, and these correspond to the themes of our anti-cancer lifestyle program online course. Some of our most popular free resources are our ebooks that we seem to be releasing quite frequently, so keep your eye on our ebook page. Some of our most popular are Mindset 101, Learning to Manage Your Stress, Anti-Inflammatory Diet ebook. We have a Detox Your Home ebook. If you're here today, I'm sure you're interested in learning about ways to reduce your exposure to harmful chemicals, and our Detox Your Home ebook helps you do just that. You can check these out on our website. My friend Nicole will drop a link in the chat right now. We also offer 7-day kickstarts. And again, you're here with us for this very important webinar. I do want to highlight our Healthy Home Kickstart. This is 7 days of practical learnings, 15-minute a day. These bits of education are going to be sent to your inbox. So you'll walk away after this week really being able to take actionable steps to reduce the harmful chemicals within your home environment. This is free. You can sign up on our site. And again, Nicole will drop a link to this Kickstart and all our other Kickstarts in the chat now. You are probably familiar with our very public social media profiles. Thank you for your participation on those profiles. I'm the social media director. I love to see your comments and questions. We also have a private Facebook group that's by request only to join. I'm not sure if you know about it. If you'd like to join, Nicole will drop a link in the chat to request an invite. It's just a more intimate way to connect with others who you know are actively taking on their anti-cancer lifestyle journey. Your donation makes a difference. We are a nonprofit, and to help us organize and present these fantastic presenters like Pujeeta, like others, and continue to offer all our free evidence-based resources, your donations really make a difference in helping improve the lives of everyone everywhere. If you are so inclined, please donate today. We truly thank you. Today, I am so excited to introduce Pujeeta Chowdhary, the Science and Education Manager at Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. My name is Erica Crespo. I'm the Social Media Director at the ACLP, and in the background is Nicole Jones. She is our Marketing Director who will be helping out with any questions or assistance or tech issues you might need. Just drop it in the chat and she'll be there for you. So, as I mentioned, Pujeeta is a science and education manager at Breast Cancer Prevention Partners, where she brings expertise in health risk assessment, environmental health, and consumer product safety. With a passion for using science to spark change, she educates diverse audience about the intersection of health and the environment. Pujeeta holds a Master of Public Health and Environmental Health Sciences from the University of California in Berkeley. She resides in Colorado with her husband and daughter, where she enjoys hiking, gardening, and experimenting with new recipes. We're so excited to learn from you today, Pujeeta. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Just going to share my screen for my presentation. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great. So again, thank you so much for the introduction. I am honored to be here today to share this webinar with you all. And as Erica said, I'll be talking about breast cancer risk factors today and what you can do to reduce your risk. Before I start, I want to tell you that this information might feel overwhelming. There's a lot of information I'm going to share with you today. And when people hear this type of information, it's easy to feel anxious or a sense of doom and gloom. But that is not our goal for today. Our goal for today's webinar is to not make you feel fearful. It's actually to help you feel empowered. And hopefully you find this information useful and helpful and you learn something so that you can use some of these tools that we're going to share to make changes in your own life. So I'll just briefly give a background of BCPP, Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. So we're a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to prevent breast cancer by eliminating exposures to toxic chemicals linked to the disease. We've been around for over 30 years, and we've been tackling our prevention work based on a strong foundation of science. So we use scientific research to understand how environmental exposures and chemicals are linked to breast cancer. We've published 36 major scientific studies and reports, everything from chemicals in fragrances and personal care products to plasticizers in IV bags and tubing. And we don't just stop at the science. We then channel our advocacy efforts in three main ways. We educate communities by translating the science to various audiences and develop materials such as fact sheets and webinars such as this one and tip cards so that people feel empowered with knowledge. And that creates the demand for safer products and safer workplaces, as well as safer communities. We also move the market towards safer products by creating corporate accountability and partnering with industry leaders to make products safer. And because we all deserve to be protected from harmful exposures linked to cancer, we work with legislators to change laws that protect us all. A lot of the laws that we pass are in California, which then can be emulated by other states with the goal of creating momentum for federal reform. We know that there's only so much that an individual can do, and that's why we're so passionate about changing the system, which means implementing laws. So far, we've passed 20 laws at the local, state, and federal level. Some examples in this slide include banning bisphenol A from baby bottles in California and the California Safer Clothes and Textiles Act. You can check out our website for details about our other victories. So why does prevention matter? Why do we do this work? I know most of you, if not all of you, likely know somebody who is battling breast cancer, or you may have even faced this disease yourself. Globally, breast cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths among women. In the US, 1 in 8 women is diagnosed in her lifetime. Over 300,000 new cases in women and 2,600 cases in men are diagnosed per year. And there are over 40,000 deaths per year. And now, breast cancer is the leading cause of cancer death for younger women ages 20 to 39. Breast cancer is also not equally distributed among ethnic groups. Black women specifically have the highest mortality rate at 31%, which is 42% higher than for white women. The incidence of breast cancer has risen more quickly in the last few decades than can be explained by genetics. So we know something else is going on here. We know that something in our environment is affecting this. In the news recently, there have been several articles you might have seen about increasing diagnoses of breast cancer in women under the age of 50. Even more alarming, breast cancer in women under 40 has increased by 3% every year from 2000 to 2019. And these headlines often don't talk about the environment as as a potential link. But scientists like us, this is exactly what we're studying, and we're trying to reverse these trends. So now I'll talk more about the science and what we know. What we know is that breast cancer is incredibly complex. And I know that you might not be able to read this slide, but I'll tell you about the key points. From our years of research, we've found there are many chemicals linked to breast cancer. But breast cancer is also influenced by radiation, light at night, which I'll talk about a little later, and pharmaceutical hormones. It's also about the timing of when those exposures happen and the social stressors that we experience. Each person's web looks different because these exposures impact all of us differently. And you might also be asking, what about genetics? For a long time, breast cancer was thought to be due to mostly mutations of inherited genes. You may have heard of the BRCA genes, but actually only a small percentage, fewer than 10% actually, of breast cancer cases are attributed to family history. Plus, environmental and lifestyle factors shown on this slide can also affect our genetics and our DNA, which impact our risk. Based on the most current science, BCPP has come up with a more digestible summary of the main factors that influence breast cancer, and those are shown here on this slide. We talk about breast cancer in terms of risk factors, which are things that increase likelihood of developing breast cancer. And there are also protective factors that decrease likelihood. I want to point out two of the strongest overarching factors that are shown in orange, which are race, power, and inequities, and social and built environment. So I'll talk about all of these factors in the next few slides, and then I'll give you tips on how to reduce exposures. We also have a brand new website with a risk factor hub that has videos and details on each one of these factors that Erica can drop into the link or into the chat. So race, power, and inequities refers to the unequal burden of disease among communities of color. As I mentioned previously, Black women have a 42% higher mortality rate than white women for breast cancer. Historical practices and institutionalized racism has limited access to resources such as housing, clean water, clean air, fresh and affordable food, and healthcare. Oftentimes, power plants and hazardous waste facilities are placed near communities of color, who then experience health hazards and reduced economic opportunities, which impacts all areas of their life. The other overarching concept that affects many other risk factors is the social and built environment. So this refers to physical infrastructure and social surroundings that may impact our health and lifestyle. For example, we know that exercise and walking, getting fresh air, and eating healthy food are good for us. But what if our neighborhood doesn't have sidewalks or has bad air quality? There's no green spaces to get outside. In some neighborhoods, there are no affordable grocery stores nearby. This type of environment impacts many aspects of a person's well-being and health, and is often beyond an individual's control. This is when systemic changes are needed to improve health of these communities, and this is where BCPP does a lot of its work. As you might know, alcohol and tobacco are well-established risk factors for breast cancer. Scientific studies indicate that the relationship between alcohol and breast cancer is dose dependent, meaning the more we drink, the higher our risk. You may have seen some recent news articles about the warnings from the Surgeon General about the link between alcohol and several types of cancer, including breast, mouth, liver, and others. But the good news here is that the less you drink, the less your risk. Tobacco smoke contains carcinogens and hormone disruptors, which I'll talk more about a little bit later. And similar to alcohol, it is dose dependent. The more you smoke, the more your risk. Place-based chemical exposures refer to living or working in areas with contaminated water, air, or soil. Studies show that living near busy roads and highways, such as less than 150 feet, increases our exposure to traffic-related pollution, such as nitrogen oxides, and that is a breast cancer carcinogen. Another example, agricultural families living near areas where pesticides are sprayed. Women in those families had higher breast cancer rates. You may have heard about the East Palestine train in Ohio carrying vinyl chloride that derailed, and residents living in that area experience higher rates of pollution. We might not think about our workplace as a risk factor, but certain occupational exposures are linked to breast cancer. Examples include occupational exposure to ionizing radiation, experienced by flight attendants and healthcare workers, for example, or those who work with hazardous industrial chemicals, night shift workers, which I'll talk about later, sedentary work, and firefighters. A few years ago, we worked on a project looking at women firefighters in San Francisco and evaluated some of their exposures to fire retardants. We've also been working with populations such as janitors and understanding their exposures from cleaning products. We have a current study that's ongoing regarding nurses and comparing their exposures to office workers to understand if nurses have a higher risk of developing breast cancer based on their workplace exposures. Coming back to light at night, which I mentioned earlier. So light at night is exposure to artificial light during hours that we should be sleeping. And this has been found to impact breast cancer risk. Sources of light at night include outdoor artificial light, such as street lamps or city lights, night shift work, and technology devices, our phones and our computers. And the way this works is that light at night can disrupt our circadian rhythm, which is crucial for many cellular functions, such as the release of hormones like melatonin, which not only helps us sleep, but it also regulates our immune response and even reduces inflammation. A large study of 164 countries found that those with the highest light at night exposure had a 30 to 50% higher breast cancer risk. Another study in the US showed a 14% increased risk of breast cancer with highest levels of outdoor light at night. There are a few other studies that show that long-term night shift work shows increased risk for breast cancer. And in fact, persistent night shift work is recognized by several authoritative scientific agencies as a probable human carcinogen. On the flip side, getting morning sunlight during the day can help regulate our circadian rhythm and actually help us sleep at night. There are two types of radiation that I'll talk about here. The first is ionizing radiation, and that refers to high frequency energy that can damage DNA. And that is a well-known risk factor for breast cancer. Examples of this include medical imaging, radon, nuclear power plants, and waste sites. The largest source of human exposure is from medical diagnostic procedures such as CT scans and X-rays. Some neighborhoods might also be located near radioactive contamination sites. Non-ionizing radiation is lower frequency and does not damage DNA. Some of the common types of non-ionizing radiation include cell phones, Wi-Fi antennas, radar, and electrical power lines. And there are limited studies on breast cancer and living close to power lines, but results are mixed and more research is needed. This type of exposure is very difficult to study because of how long studies can take. Breast cancer has a long latency period, takes years to develop, and our technology changes very quickly every year. Pharmaceutical hormones. In this specific presentation, we're going to specifically talk about combined HRT for the most part, which is estrogen and synthetic progestin. And these are for women to help them reduce menopause symptoms. Science shows that combined HRT increases breast cancer risk. In addition, cancers are diagnosed at a later stage, and the mortality of breast cancer is higher when using HRT. In a very large study of 27,000 postmenopausal women aged 50 to 79, results showed that breast cancer risk increased among women taking HRT. And because of this, that study was actually stopped at around 5.5 years due to increased breast cancer cases. The study actually also demonstrated that breast cancer incidence dropped since 2002 because of the decreased HRT use. There is some slight evidence that also shows estrogen-only HRT might slightly increase breast cancer risk. And there's a lot of information on our website about pharmaceutical hormones and HRT. Pregnancy is generally considered a protective factor of breast cancer. Breastfeeding is also a protective factor and includes combination feeding when a mother breastfeeds or bottle feeds. Studies show that mothers who breastfeed the longest have a 50% lower risk of breast cancer than those breastfeeding for the shortest amount of time. Some communities of color face barriers to breastfeeding, such as a lack of social and cultural acceptance in their communities and inadequate support from healthcare providers, as well as unsupportive work environments. So if paid leave, for example, is not provided, a woman is forced to return to work earlier and thus may not be able to breastfeed for as long as she wants. Some states do offer protections, such as in California, to help mothers and encourage them to breastfeed as long as possible. Food and nutrition is very important, as you might know, for overall health and well-being. There's no magical diet or food that will prevent breast cancer, but in general, a diet of mostly whole foods, organic if possible, to minimize synthetic pesticides like organophosphates and glyphosate, plenty of vegetables, healthy fats, fruits and fiber, and plant-based protein are shown to lower chronic diseases, including breast cancer. Diets high in bread, meat, and processed meat, which is a recognized carcinogen. Processed foods high in sugar and preservatives and saturated fat can increase breast cancer risk. Physical activity is a protective factor for breast cancer. Many people have sedentary jobs or don't live in areas with safe parks or spaces to walk, which goes back to the built environment issue I mentioned previously. But we do know that maintaining physical strength and agility into old age is extremely important for overall health and disease prevention. You may have heard the term sitting is the new smoking. So CDC recommends at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week, or at least 75 minutes of vigorous activity per week. I want to spend some time talking about chemicals in consumer products. This is gaining more attention every day as people become aware and want to make more conscious choices about what they purchase. A recent study by Silent Spring Institute found that 921 chemicals in our everyday environment are linked to breast cancer. Some of these chemicals are carcinogens, which are chemicals that lead to tumors and cause cancer, and others are called hormone disruptors, which are important to understand because breast cancer is a hormonal disease. And I have a slide on hormone disruptors in a few minutes. 90% of the chemicals that are on this list are ones that people are commonly exposed to in food and water, but also consumer products like cosmetics, textiles and furniture, cleaning products, children's toys, home goods and building materials, as well as medications. And just to highlight what some of these chemicals are, and there's many more than this is just a snapshot. Bisphenols and polyvinyl chloride, which are found in certain plastics and food packaging. Phthalates are found in fragrances, cosmetics, and certain plastics to make them flexible and soft. Flame retardants are found in furniture, electronics, and dust. And per and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, or PFAS, you might have heard the term forever chemicals, and these are found in non-stick cookware, stain or waterproof textiles, and even some contaminated drinking water sources. Research shows that women of color face greater exposure to such chemicals. I previously talked about place-based exposures, but also in the cosmetics industry as a result of beauty injustice. And as a fun fact, there are 80,000 chemicals registered in US commerce. About 40,000 are currently used, but very few have been tested for human safety. So this is why scientists are coming out with these types of studies in hopes to raise awareness of health harms and try to get the worst of the worst chemicals regulated. I also want to talk about fragrances, particularly synthetic or artificial fragrances in detail, because fragrances are everywhere and they do contain harmful chemicals. They're in dryer sheets, air fresheners, hair care, and even makeup. And oftentimes when you look at a product, the ingredient label just says the word fragrance. But that itself is a concoction of dozens of chemicals. And because that mixture is a proprietary company trade secret, the actual ingredients of that fragrance are rarely disclosed. And this is a problem. If you're trying to buy something and you have no idea what's in it, how do you know that it's safe? Just in the last year, we looked at 4,000 chemicals listed in the fragrance database and found dozens of chemicals linked to cancer and hormone disruption. Even more are linked to skin irritation and respiratory hazards. Women experience more health effects than men from fragrances because hormone disruptors in fragrance, for example, can affect fertility and pregnancy and lead to negative health effects in the fetus. I've talked about hormone disruptors a couple of times, so let's try to understand what that means. So going back to what is a hormone? Hormones are chemical messengers in our bloodstream that send signals to all parts of our body. They help with growth and development, normal functions, regulation of normal functions, reproduction, sleep, etc. So some examples that you might have heard of include estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, melatonin, and many others. And the way they work is by attaching to specific targets or receptors on a cell. So the yellow on this image is a receptor, and the blue triangles are natural hormones in our body. It's kind of like how a key would fit into a lock. And once that key, that hormone, connects to its receptor, a chain of events is triggered inside the cell. And the cell gets a signal that it's supposed to do something, like making proteins, reading DNA, or making more cells, etc. However, foreign chemicals that mimic our natural hormones, which are hormone disruptors, shown in red, can end up in our bloodstream and attach to those same receptors. And it's not an exact fit. The cell does not produce the same response that it would normally. And so these impacts to cellular functions can cause a negative chain of events, which eventually can lead to things like breast cancer. Breast cancers are sensitive to hormones such as estrogen. And on the right, you'll see an example of a hormone disruptor called benzoate pyrene. I haven't mentioned this chemical yet, but it's a chemical that is formed during combustion of organic matter. And you can kind of see that it looks a little bit like estrogen. So benzoate could potentially attach to an estrogen receptor and alter cellular response. The reason that hormone disruptors are such a huge issue is that they can be harmful at very small doses. In traditional toxicology, as shown on the left graph, the higher the dose of a chemical, the worse the health outcome. However, what we've learned with hormone disruptors is that this is not true. In fact, even small amounts of hormone disruptors can be incredibly harmful because of the impact they have on our cellular response. So you'll see in the chart on the right, smaller amounts can lead to a higher effect. I'll also add that timing of exposure matters. Hormones are very important during crucial development periods, such as pregnancy and puberty. So any disruptions in these biological processes can lead to detrimental effects down the road. And after seeing all this information, a lot of people wonder, how are all of these harmful chemicals ending up in our products? And the reason this is happening has to do with how chemicals are regulated in the US. So in the US, a chemical is innocent until proven guilty. So what happens is companies are constantly creating new chemicals that are new and better than the previous. But they're not required to prove a chemical safety before they put it in products. And so then consumers, we buy these products with these chemicals, and later, years later, we find that people are having health problems from these chemicals. And that's when the research happens. That's when scientists spend years doing studies to build evidence that the chemical is harmful to humans or the environment. And then we try to pass laws to improve chemical safety or ban chemicals. But industry is very powerful and they influence lawmakers with money. And so these laws don't always pass because the industry claims that it will harm business and innovation. And this is why it's very hard to ban a chemical in the US. For example, only 11 chemicals have been banned in the US, in cosmetics specifically. And in Europe, in the European Union, it's kind of the opposite. Companies are required to prove a chemical is safe first before it's used in products. Many harmful chemicals are banned and don't get into products in the first place. So as a comparison, there are 2,400 chemicals banned in the EU from cosmetics. So now that I've given you an overview of risks and environmental factors linked to breast cancer, I'll pivot into what can we do. And everybody take a deep breath. If that was overwhelming, it's a lot of information. And I'll just add that a lot of work needs to be done at the community and systemic level, as I mentioned, but those processes are slow. So there are lots of things that you can start doing today if it fits into your lifestyle. And I also don't want you to feel that you have to implement all of these strategies at the same time. You can swap out things as the time is right. If you're looking for a new sunscreen or a new lotion because you ran out, maybe you can implement some of these strategies, but don't feel like you have to throw everything away. So in general, our studies on tap water have found that it's better than bottled water. Bottled water can leach chemicals. But we do recommend, if you would like to use a water filter, depending on what your water quality is. And you can check out our water filter guide for more information on how to find out more about your water quality as well as selecting a filter. Consider using an air filter that can be useful indoors to minimize contaminants in indoor air, such as off-gassing furniture or from gas stoves. And for resources on that, we recommend checking out California Air Resources Board, or they have a lot of resources on how to select a filter. Consider natural materials for furniture, clothing, and textiles. You can look for the GOTS or the Global Organic Textile Standard seal, which is the highest certification for textiles. There's also the Green Guard Gold certification, which is usually on some furniture. And that means the product has been tested for low emissions. And when you're shopping, feel free to ask about flame retardants or volatile organic compounds. Try to avoid stain-proof or waterproof, as this often means that there's some kind of coating on the textile or furniture material. Try to choose low or no volatile organic compound or VOC materials for home projects, such as paint and finishes. If you can, limit or avoid scented products like air fresheners or candles, and specifically synthetic fragrances. Try to avoid vinyl products. These are in shower curtains and certain packaging and certain toys, especially the cheap Dollar Tree type toys that can contain harmful additives that we're giving to our kids. And for safer personal care products, try to swap out products with no fragrances or no dyes. We've actually also developed a safer sunscreen guide that has a lot of resources. And on our Campaign for Safe Cosmetics website, we have resources on how to choose safer products. And we have an entire database of actual products that we have screened for a list of harmful ingredients. We also recommend an app called Clearia, which scans ingredients and it alerts you for which ones are harmful. So you can download Clearia on your phone or even use it as a web browser extension when you're shopping online on Target or Amazon. Made Safe is also a really great organization that has very robust standards for certifying all kinds of products. They do everything from personal care to textiles, and a lot of other things. For safer cleaning tips, we recommend to use a damp cloth to wipe dust rather than using a duster, which can cause the dust to fly back into the air. And house dust is a magnet for pollutants, so we want to minimize how much dust is in the air. And also for that reason, we recommend vacuuming with a vacuum that has a HEPA filter to capture the dust. Also looking for safer products. There's a EPA Safer Choice seal that is added to products that don't have harmful ingredients, and that's a really great resource. You can even look up the Safer Choice website by EPA. They have a database where you can filter for specific products that you're looking for, like laundry detergent or a window cleaner, and it'll give you a list of products that are Safer Choice certified. Try not to use bleach or ammonia or phosphates. These are really harsh cleaners and they can irritate skin, lungs, and are toxic to the environment. And in many cases, these harsh cleaners aren't necessary. Again, try to find fragrance-free or no synthetic fragrances, or even dye-free. For disinfectants, try to find things that are plant-based active ingredients, such as citric acid. Avoid antimicrobial and antibacterial products, which can contain triclosan, triclocarban, or benzalkonium chloride, or even other onium chloride compounds. So these are compounds that are linked to hormone disruption, and they're very toxic to aquatic life. I actually started using Dr. Bronner's. I'm simplifying my own home routine, and there's a picture of it in the slide here, but it's just a bottle of Castile soap, and there's even recipes on it on how to dilute it to use for various applications. For safer food, we recommend to prioritize fresh, whole organic food when possible, as I mentioned, to minimize synthetic pesticides. We recommend minimizing plastic when possible. So that includes water bottles, food containers, wrappers, even cutting boards and utensils in your kitchen. And try not to reheat food in plastic. Sometimes you can even just, if you're having a meal, a pre-prepared meal that's frozen or store-bought, transfer it to a bowl and then reheat it. And also use food safe glass or stainless steel for storing food. For pans, try to use stainless steel or cast iron for cooking, because some of these nonstick pans have a coating like Teflon, which contains per and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, or the forever chemicals. And those coatings degrade over time and then end up in our food. And instead of canned foods, which can contain bisphenols, try frozen or glass jar options. And try to limit processed meats, which are a recognized carcinogen. For safer schools, ditch plastic lunchboxes and water bottles and opt for stainless steel options. Try to avoid scented products that can contain phthalates. So sometimes kids' products like markers and stickers and glue contain phthalates because of the scent. Avoid PVC and PFAS, which are the forever chemicals, in backpacks, toys, binders, and pouches. Use our sunscreen guide to select a safer sunscreen. You can also have either you and your kids use sun protective clothing as well. We also recommend to be an advocate. Sometimes schools are open to this. If you bring safer products into the school, like fragrance-free soap, recommending safer cleaning products and safer sunscreens. Safer healthcare. Discuss with your medical provider if radiation-free alternatives can be used for imaging, especially for children and women with BRCA mutations getting mammograms. Request that medical images are shared between providers so that you don't duplicate testing, and that way you can minimize your radiation exposures. Ask about non-PVC IV bags. So some IV bags and tubing are made of PVC, which can leach a plasticizer called di-2-ethylhexyl phthalate, or DEHP. And so that plasticizer leaches directly into the fluids and the medications that's going into the bloodstream. And DEHP is linked to hormone disruption in breast cancer and has been found to even interfere with some chemotherapy treatments. We have an entire campaign on our website about the Toxic Free IV campaign, and please visit that website to learn more. Try to avoid combination hormone replacement therapies. Talk to your provider about other options if possible. And if possible, use dye-free medications. Safer lifestyle. There's a bunch of things that we can all do to incorporate some of these changes if it makes sense in your life. Exercise and stay active. This can benefit many aspects of your life. Prioritize restful sleep. If you need to try blackout curtains, if you live in a city with bright lights outside, I know this part's particularly difficult, is avoiding screens before bedtime, reducing alcohol or avoiding alcohol, and avoiding smoking and secondhand smoke. Boosting vitamin D by getting sunshine. Vitamin D is an essential nutrient for many functions in our bodies. If you're pregnant, consider breastfeeding for as long as possible. Reduce before recycling, especially for plastic. Only 8% of plastic gets recycled, and the rest goes back into the waste stream, which ends right back up in our air and our water. So the less we use, the better. And aim to be an educated, conscious consumer. If you're curious about what's in a product, ask questions. And it would be great to share this information with youth as puberty is a very sensitive time development, and the decisions that they make today can impact them for many years. As I mentioned, for consumer products, you can use tools like Clearia and Made Safe and our campaign for safe cosmetics to help find safer products. We also, I mentioned, have a risk factor hub, so you can get more information on all of the factors that I discussed today. So feel free to check out those resources. And that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. Again, check out our website, subscribe to our emails because we have a lot of great resources and content. If you want to get involved or support our work, there's a section on our website about how you can take action. And we do a lot of great events across the country. So if you subscribe to the emails, then you'll likely hear about those events. So I'll pass it back to Erica.
Thank you so much, Fujita. That was absolutely fabulous presentation. Before we move on to Q&A, I do want to remind folks we have a survey we'll be passing out towards the end of the Q&A. We would love for you to take it. It takes a few seconds. It really helps us organize and plan our events moving forward, the topics you'd like for us to discuss. It's very helpful for our year planning, so please take it if you'd like a say. Save the date as well. Our next webinar is actually a Facebook Live. So if you're on Facebook, we have a Facebook event you can RSVP to. It's we're presenting Dr. Zuri Morel. He's going to take your live questions, and it's about colorectal cancer risks and prevention. And again, that is March 26th. So please save the date. Now, let's get into some questions, which we had plenty of. Thank you for everyone who submitted questions in advance on our RSVP form, and we had a lot of action in the chat. Pujeeta, my first question I would like to be, there was a lot of discussion in the chat and Q&A box about the HRT risk study you touched on. A lot of people were wondering, is this an outdated study? And if these studies are old, is there any indication that any of them were flawed studies? And what about bioidentical HRT versus synthetic?
Yes, great questions. And yes, this study was a large study. There are some criticisms of that study. For example, the population of women is skewed on to the older side. And so I believe there are some new studies, and we have a brand new updated HRT website. If you look on our risk factors hub, pharmaceutical hormones and HRT are specifically discussed in very much detail, and some of the specifics that you're asking about are shown on that site. So definitely take a look at that.
Great, thank you. Do you have concerns that a reverse osmosis filtration system might take out the good minerals?
Um, RO is a really effective way to minimize contaminants, and there could be a lack of minerals. A lot of it is due to taste. People sometimes want that sort of spring water taste when they're drinking their water. And so there are other options if it comes down to you wanting those minerals. I believe there's a way to add them back in, or you can select a filtration process that does not strip those minerals. And there's a very comprehensive filter guide that we have on our website. And really what's important is to understand why you're filtering your water. If there's some contaminant that you're concerned about, try to get the filter that gets that contaminant out specifically. And that's why the filter guide walks you through that process of understanding what's in your water quality report. That's the first step. And that's for people that pay a water bill. They get their water through a city source like a municipality. If you have a domestic well or a private well, the process is a little bit different because you won't really have a water quality test. So definitely go through those resources on our website.
Thank you. What do you think? At least I see these commercials everywhere nowadays, it seems. What do you think of total body deodorant?
Total body deodorant. It depends on what's in it. Um, I'm not sure if there's a specific question about that, but in general, deodorants often contain fragrance, which I've meant, as you saw, can contain many different types of chemicals. Um, there are a lot of more natural deodorants on the market now. I've tried a few and I've developed rashes from some. So it really is a matter of personal preference. But, I would try to use Clearia as a screen for finding chemicals in a specific product that you're looking at, a specific deodorant. And if you can, minimize the fragrance exposure.
Great, thanks. Are annual mammograms safe in terms of radiation exposure?
That is a great question. So mammograms are about the same dose of radiation as an X-ray, and mammograms are effective at, it's a great screening tool for identifying early breast cancer. Um, but if you are higher risk in terms of, if you talk to your medical provider about your risk, your individual risk, say you have the BRCA mutation, there might be alternatives that can be used, that non-radiation imaging, such as an MRI or an ultrasound. So your doctor will really be able to help you navigate through that. And but we do recommend mammogram screenings. Yes.
A, a couple questions regarding smoking and vaping. What is the research on secondhand smoke exposure on breast cancer risk? And then vaping versus cigarettes. Do you have any knowledge or research on that, on the safety of vaping versus cigarettes?
Vaping also releases chemicals into your lungs. And I don't know the specifics compared to smoking, but it's still recommended to refrain from that activity. And secondhand smoke, there's a lot of inhalation of the same chemicals that can happen with secondhand smoke. So it's really best to avoid that exposure.
Tattoos and henna. Do tattoos raise your risk? And if they do, does color or location matter? And henna, is henna an organic henna safe to use on your body?
Good questions. I am not familiar with tattoo ink specifically. I think there's some BCPP staff that have more experience with that. But henna, I would say as long as it's a company that you trust and is a reputable source of henna, even with natural products, natural is not always safer. You really should try to look at the company's disclosure, as much information that they provide on the product, the better. And if you don't see something disclosed, it's probably better to not use it. So henna seems to be a good option as long as it's from a reputable source.
What about acrylic products like containers and vases? Are they similar to plastics in that they're not good to use?
Acrylic products. I think it would depend on the type of finish or the paint that's inside. I know sometimes they can contain lead, but I don't know. It would depend on that. It's probably very product specific.
Mhm. What are some of the best ways to keep cancer-causing chemicals out of our cosmetic routine?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, Minimizing fragrance is a good one. Trying to even simplify your routine, maybe using certain things less often, or just, like I said, to simplify, using less products in general. Um, I would say there are some more harmful chemicals in certain types of products, like hair straightening, permanent hair straightening, hair dyes, and nail products, especially too.
Right.
There are certain preservatives in cosmetics. So we have a whole campaign for Safe Cosmetics website that actually breaks down top chemicals to avoid by product category. So that might be a really useful resource for you.
And I love Yucca and Clearia apps.
Yes.
as well. I personally use those every time I'm at the pharmacy or store. I find them very helpful.
Yes, and actually was going to add, there's an online website, Credo, that is basically like a Sephora, but they only sell cleaner brands. And so a lot of these similar products that you're looking for, like mascara or foundation, you can look on Credo and they have a lot of inventory.
That's great. And going back to the apps, we have some questions about people attending our webinar are using these apps and using quite a few of them at once, and it can be overwhelming. And sometimes they might provide conflicting information. Do you have a recommendation of like the best bang for your buck or what to do when it feels overwhelming?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, have to do one step at a time, at least for myself. If I run out, I don't try to replace multiple things at a time because that's really overwhelming. So if I run out of one product, then I'll kind of like go and say, what are the resources that I have to my disposal to replace that one product? And so the top recommendations that we've talked about here, Made Safe, Clearia, and Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, and Erica mentioned a couple others. If there's conflicting information, that's always a really tough one to navigate, and that might indicate that there actually isn't enough data to make a confident decision about that chemical. So, but if you're avoiding the worst of the worst, you're already in a much better place.
What products and brands, I know you mentioned some in the presentation, even reiterating those, would you say are non-toxic and safe for the body?
I mean, it depends on what type of product you're talking about, but I would trust anything that's in our Campaign for Safe Cosmetics database. And I also shop at Credo. Like I mentioned, they have a very robust do not use list. So I would trust anything that they sell as well.
Do you have any thoughts about laminate flooring?
Yeah, building materials are tricky because they're not always transparent about what's in them. I know that some can be made out of vinyl, and it is a, really easy and cheap material to use. I mean, I would try to not use that if possible, but I know that that's not always feasible for many people. Um, but I don't have any really specific recommendations other than that.
Can you recap some ways to protect ourselves from forever chemicals?
Yes, absolutely. Forever chemicals are in so many different products. Um, so we can start in the kitchen. So trying to replace nonstick pans with stainless steel or cast iron. Nonstick pans have usually it's a PFAS coating, and that's what makes them nonstick. Um, there's also PFAS in makeup, sometimes like waterproof mascaras and things like that. And so if you scan the ingredient label using something like Clearia, like we've mentioned, you could find something that does not have PFAS. There are some water filters that can take out some PFAS chemicals from water as well. Trying to think what else. Sometimes lunch boxes or other food containers contain PFAS, a coating like PFAS that can leach into the food. So trying to really minimize anything that says that has they have a waterproof or stain resistant. Even furniture. Sometimes we when we're shopping, there's performance fabrics that are pet friendly or pet safe, and so those tend to also have some of these forever chemicals. So when you're shopping for furniture, it's really good to just be an advocate for yourself and ask those questions.
You know what? We just released a new ebook called Toxic Textiles. So if you are shopping for furniture or looking to swap out some things, look up Textiles ebook on our site. It's extremely informative. Pujita, can you address the effect of stress on breast cancer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have some information in a report that we published about stress, and I didn't list it in this presentation, but I think it's because stress is more, when we talk about stress, there's just so many factors in our body that it can affect. And so it can, lead to inflammation and just a lot of issues. So um, I think stress is a really important topic to talk about. But and when I give this presentation, I meant to actually say, like, it's probably good to not stress because that's not going to help any of us. It's a stressful environment, but whatever we can do to minimize stress can not only help reduce breast cancer risk, but many other impacts to our body. And so, implementing physical activity type of regimen can really help.
Is there any such thing as safe hair dye?
Hmm, that is a good question. When I look on databases that have safe products, I don't really see hair dye. I, I'm trying to remember if our campaign for safe cosmetics has any hair dyes in our database. I mean, a lot of people use henna, which is a natural hair dye, and you can use things like indigo or even coffee or tea to change the hues. So
Mm.
that's one way to tackle, dyeing hair.
What are your thoughts on antibacterial soaps? Obviously, that is all in our minds still from the pandemic and whatnot.
Yeah, that is a really, really good topic. I could give an entire presentation on cleaning products. I just did a whole seminar for domestic workers, and we talked a lot about antibacterial and antimicrobial. So antimicrobial and antibacterial products, especially like hand soaps, they contain what are called quaternary ammonium compounds, and those are linked to a lot of health effects, including endocrine disruption, and they're very toxic to aquatic life. And so the CDC, EPA, and the FDA all actually recommend that regular soap is the best in terms of washing hands and cleaning. So they don't recommend antibacterial and antimicrobial anymore due to not only the health effects that I mentioned, but also because it impacts the ability of superbugs to form. So
Mm.
these bacteria resistant forms can really wreak havoc on all of our environments. And that's a really big issue because once those are formed, it's really hard to get rid of them. And so microbial resistance is like a big topic. And we've been recommending just regular soap. I think I don't know if everyone was able to see, but just well, like a Castile soap, no fragrance if possible. Really simple and very effective.
Thank you. And what about clean perfumes? We talked a lot about wanting to be fragrance free. How does that fit in,
Mhm.
perfumes that promote themselves as clean?
Yes. There are some companies, I believe Henry Rose is one that we have worked with in the past, that are it's a lot of it is about transparency. So when you see a perfume, most of the time they're not going to tell you what chemicals are inside.
Mhm.
And there are some fragrance companies now that are trying to be more transparent. So not only will they tell you what is inside the fragrance, they'll tell you the ingredients, but they try to remove the worst of the worst chemicals from those fragrances. So I mean, and I know that fragrance is such a huge part of the human experience. It's really hard to just like throw all of your fragrances away. And I'm not saying to do that at all. I think I'm what we're trying to say is just be more mindful about fragrance. If there's say that you use 20 products a day, and
Mm.
maybe all of those products don't need to have a fragrance. You can pick certain ones where you really, really want that fragrance and then do away with the others.
Is there any correlation that you know of between IVF medications and breast cancer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, IVF medications are likely, impacting hormones, and anything that impacts hormones does carry a risk of breast cancer. But I will say that, even with, contraception and IVF, the amount uh, the duration of those exposures is really what is critical. So using it for a short period of time and then coming off of it is a good way to reduce risk.
Can you discuss the risks in daughters of mothers who were exposed to endocrine disruptors and carcinogens?
Yeah, so I didn't mention this specifically, but there are chemicals that, and including endocrine disruptors, that actually affect um, health across generations. So a mother that was exposed to a chemical that could be an endocrine disruptor or something else, when she's pregnant, the fetus has a lot of development going on, and their reproductive organs in the fetus are being developed as the mother is pregnant. And so, if she's exposed to something, that reproductive developmental time period in the fetus can be impacted. So, like the fertility, for example, of that fetus, 30 years later, you won't see the effects right now, but 30 years later, you might see the effects. And so, and that's going to affect their offspring. So we really have this, 1 to 2 generational effect of certain chemicals. DES is a great example.
Questions about air pollution. I'm in the LA area, so obviously we've had these massive wildfires lately. How much should we pay attention to air quality maps? Like I use Air Visual app, and how important are they for us to monitor whether we go outside or open our windows?
Yeah. It is heartbreaking what happened in LA. And, air pollution is a really big issue. We've done some work on air pollution and breast cancer specifically. There are certain populations that are more vulnerable to, acute effects of air pollution. And so for those people, with asthma and other respiratory issues, it is really important to pay attention to the contaminants that are in the air. So, ozone and PM 2.5 are examples. And so really trying to limit your outdoor time during when the air pollution is particularly bad. Even wearing a respirator N95 mask can help, but shutting doors, shutting windows, and again, using the air purifiers in your home to help minimize those contaminants coming in. Those are some things that you can do.
To what extent does diet increase the incidence of breast cancer, particularly animal fats? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, overall, we recommend a diet that is, rich in fruits and vegetables, high fiber, healthy fats, plant-based protein. And I believe you might have even more resources in your ebook on food and cancer.
Yes, we
So
have.
that might be a good place to get specifics.
Yeah, we have a diet module and we have quite a few diet ebooks. I know we often receive a lot of questions about soy's impact on
Mhm.
breast cancer. I'm not sure if you can speak to any of that right now, but we do have, if you're curious, a soy and cancer ebook on our site as well. Did you want to speak to soy and breast
I mean,
cancer?
I can't. Yeah, I mean, a lot of I have been asked about soy, and soy is actually not does not increase risk to breast cancer. There are so soy contains phytoestrogens and specifically isoflavones, which are actually shown to be protective in some cases of breast cancer. So I really, yeah, recommend to look at that resource that has been dropped in the chat.
Great. Is there a safe type of parchment paper you'd recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, Parchment paper, the one that, the ones, I don't know what kinds are available these days out there, but if there's one that says it does not have PFAS or PFCs, that's a good option. And anything that's like not bleached, so the ones that are more, the brown or tanner colored ones, I would recommend. I would recommend those.
Great. A question I love to end on. And what are some of your lifestyle changes that you would recommend walking away today necessary to protect ourselves?
Yeah, simplifying everything, trying to be really conscious of what I'm buying. It's really easy in this day and age. With the click of a button, you can just go online and buy everything or anything under the sun. So just trying to understand, ask the questions, what is in the product I'm buying? That alone is going to help you, just eliminate certain things that, you may have heard today or you may already know about, but just trying to really learn about what you're buying and introducing into your home. Plastics is always a top priority of mine to minimize if possible. And that's in a lot of aspects of my life, including clothing. A lot of athleisure wear and things like that are made of plastics, nylon and polyester. And so just, doing these small changes in different phases of your life. And, I've eliminated a lot of fragrance as well.
Wonderful. I thank you so much for your time, Pujeeta. This has been very worthwhile. Everyone, thanks for your very active participation. It's just the type of audience we love. We appreciate you being here and taking an hour out for yourself. This is self-care, right? I'll see you on March 26th on Facebook for our Facebook Live. Hope to see everyone there, and everyone have a fantastic week. Thank you, Pujeeta.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.